Well, hi, and welcome back. We're going to start Monday off with our favorite subject, grammar and syntax. Yeah, I know. Quit rolling your eyes. Okay. We're actually getting into the exciting stuff now. We're really starting to put together what we've learned about the basics of nouns and verbs, and now we're going to bend the rules a little bit, and we're going to learn how verbs can act as nouns and how a whole clause can be used just as like one word. So it's kind of fun. This is where English gets exciting. Okay, so in the lesson plans, you had a link for a note taking handout. So hopefully you've printed that out, and we'll use it along the way. It looks like this. So if not, pause the recording and go print that out. Or you could make up your own, it doesn't matter. Okay, let's jump into our 25th lesson on noun clauses. Now, I'm going to start approaching these concepts because they're more complex in a little bit different way that I think is clear. We're going to look at each of these grammar elements by what they mean, by their form, by their frame, and by their function. So meaning, form, frame, and function. And I'll go over what each one means. So we're on meaning. So meaning obviously means their definition. We're defining what the word is standing for. So noun clauses. We can kind of look at the word and do some pre-thinking and guessing what a noun clause is just by taking the two words and thinking about their independent definitions. So let's do that. Let's just try to predict. So let's look at nouns. What's a noun? Well, we know, most of us know that nouns are persons, places, or things. Most grammarians define nouns as words that refer to people, places, things, and ideas. And basically, that's a more accurate definition of a noun because the word noun comes from the Latin nomen, meaning name. So nouns name objects, such as persons, places, things, and inanimate objects, such as ideas. So we know, but we kind of know that already. We also have to remember that the form of the noun can tell us three very important things. It can tell us if it's possessive or has possession. It can tell us the number of those things, and it can tell us the gender. So remember, too, that pronouns take the place of nouns, so they function the same way as a noun. Okay, they're just a subcategory, really. What frames a noun in a sentence then is the possessive markers, the apostrophe S, article adjectives are always, not always, but when they're there, they represent that a noun is going to follow it. Adjectives tend to frame or surround nouns. So we know that nouns have meaning, we know their frame, and we know their function, that they're heads of noun phrases. They're part of the core sentence, and they perform jobs in a sentence. They can perform some subjobs. So nouns can be the subject of the sentence, so that core part of the sentence, or they can be objects, such as indirect objects, direct objects. They can be complements, such as predicate nominatives, that's following a linking verb. They can be objects of the prepositions. They can be appositives, things that rename the noun to clarify. And some jobs we haven't learned yet that nouns can do or function is as an object complement, um, a noun phrase modifier, and an adjunct adverbial. Okay, well, that sounds really fancy, but we're not going to worry about that right now. So, given that the word noun is in noun clause, we can assume then that a noun clause will what? It's going to have the same or similar form, frames, and functions as what we know the single word noun to be. Let's look at clause. We know that a clause is a group of words that has both a subject and verb, and its function is to tell us the who and the what of the meaning. So putting that all together then, what is a noun clause? Look a little bit further in where clauses fit in a sentence. Okay? Sentences are made up of clauses and phrases. Simple sentence, of course, can have just an independent clause, so no phrase, or it can have a phrase. But we know that sentences are made up of both clauses and phrases. Now let's look at the subgroups of clauses. Clauses then can be independent, meaning standing on their own, or they can be dependent, meaning they're relying on an independent clause. So they're at the lower tier, or they're a step down or beneath the independent clause, so they're called subordinate. So dependent or subordinate, those are synonyms. They mean really essentially the same thing for a clause. And in English, there are basically three types of clauses, subordinate clauses. There's adverbials, so an adverb clause, an adjective clause, and what we're going to look at today, the noun clause. So before we totally understand the complete definition, I wanted us to see the visual connection of where it all fits in the puzzle. So a noun clause then is a dependent or subordinate clause used simply as a noun. It's just replacing the noun. It can be plugged into the subject, the direct object, the indirect object, the subject complement, which we call predicate nominative, the object of the preposition and a positive, any of those positions of a sentence. So it's really that simple. A noun clause is just a dependent clause that's used to replace the noun or to be used as if it was a single noun, a single unit. So, recognizing a type of subordinate clause is the noun clause. And like we said, simple definition, a subordinate clause used as a noun. If you need more time to write, just pause the record. Okay, let's look. We mentioned form, but let's look a little closer at what the form or how we put it together, what a noun clause looks like. So noun clauses forms. Well, since they're a subordinate clause, they have a subordinating conjunction. Or sometimes an unstated conjunction, usually the word that. So like we have an unstated you in the subject of a sentence, of a command sentence, we can also have an unstated conjunction where we don't state it, but it naturally fits that would be in the front of that clause. And sometimes that's in the front of it, and it really doesn't serve a grammatical function. It's just something we in English say, but there's really no function for it in looking at the sentence structure. So, the form of a noun clause. If you see a noun clause, it's going to have typically a subordinating conjunction. Usually it's that, if, whether, any of the WH words, who, what, when, where, why, and the WH ever words, like whoever, whichever, and then however, which doesn't have the WH, but it's in there. So the form will have some sort of conjunction most of the time, subordinating conjunction, and then it'll be followed by a clause, subject plus a verb. So its form, subordinating conjunction, sometimes it's an unstated that, and sometimes it's a that with no grammatical function. Some other examples of subordinating conjunctions are down here below. How, that, whether, why, whenever, wherever, whatever, whichever, whoever, and then the WH questions. When, where, what, who, whom, whose. So that is your conjunction words. Okay, let's look at the frame of noun clauses. They're basically the same as nouns. So the only exception is they're preceded by a conjunction. If they're replacing an object of the prepositions, it's a clause being used as an object of the preposition, it's going to have the preposition in front of it, just like a single noun does for the object of the preposition. Unless used as in a positive, the frame of a noun clause, it usually does not have a comma around it, because usually it's an essential part of the story of that sentence. It's giving vital information. So it usually does not have a comma around it. Again, in a positive situation, that would be different. And there are a few other exceptions, but that's just a general rule. All right, so the functions of nouns. Noun clauses perform the nominal or noun functions. They're just giving more information. There are about 9 functions of noun clauses. There's some people say 11 of nouns, but we're just going to say they basically know noun clauses perform the same function as nouns. So what are they? Subjects, subject complements like predicate nominatives, direct objects, object of the complement, object complements, which we don't know about yet, indirect objects, object of the preposition, adjective phrase complements, noun phrase complements, and appositives. And if you grab my slide and make a copy of it in Google Slides, these are links that give a little information about each of those 9 functions. And I've got that from the linguistics girl, who I like a whole bunch. Okay. Noun clauses we're going through the functions, so let's look at them as subjects or objects. Let's look at some examples. So we can take, I like what he said, and we can look at how we have a noun clause functioning as an object. I like. What do you like? What he said, the direct object. Noun clauses can also be used as an object of the preposition. We decided to look into how much it costs. Notice that we is the subject, decided is the verb, and then we have our prepositional phrase, to what? Look into how much it costs. To look is actually an infinitive. The prepositional phrase is into, is our preposition, and to what? How much it costs. Okay? We can also use noun clauses as complements, so predicate nominatives. So what's going to come in front of that? What comes in front of a predicate nominative? You got it, linking verb. Okay? Harry's problem was that he couldn't make a decision. Notice that was, problem is the noun. Whose problem? Harry's. Was is our linking verb. Here's our subordinate conjunction that. So we have behind it a noun clause, and that whole thing is being used as a one single unit as the object of the preposition. Diagramming really helps us see this clearer, and we'll diagram in a minute. And there's a couple of other examples there if you want to pause and go through them. Okay, here's a hint too. Noun clauses are used with common phrases. So, question words, it usually begins with question words, or if, whether are often used with common phrases, such as I don't know is a common phrase, and you add a noun clause to it. I don't know if blah, 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 blah. So I can't remember, please tell me, do you know? Those are common phrases that typically noun clauses go like to hang out with, okay? So I don't know when he will return. When he will return is the noun clause, and it's saying what you don't know, okay? Looking down at C, yes, no questions can be expressed as noun clauses. Are you coming to the party? You can add a noun clause to it in form of an indirect question. I don't know if you are coming to the party. Okay. Clear as mud, right? It's really not hard. What's tricky is just remembering to kind of bracket it in your mind. And again, diagramming will help you see what we're trying to learn. So noun functions. They're just like nouns. They function as subjects, objects, complements. They hang out with common phrases and are used in indirect questions or yes/no questions. All right, let's look at diagram. So a noun clause is placed on a little bitty looking tree, this right here, which occupies like the place that the ordinary noun would be. So in my example here, you have the subject, the verb, and the straight line, meaning this is a direct object. So this unit is functioning as a direct object. So the sentence, you know, I like reading. Now notice the unstated that is not in there, but it makes sense, right? You know that I like reading. Okay, so you is our subject, know is our verb, and what do we know? We know this whole unit that I like reading. So that is our noun clause. Okay, so we make a little tree, and then we do basically our regular diagram on top of that little stand or tree. All right, so some quick tips. A noun clause cannot be removed. The sentence won't make sense. Okay, so that's a good test if you're not sure if you have a noun clause. Try to remove the clause and see, or the group of words, and see if the sentence still makes sense. Now, I said they can't be removed, but noun clauses can be replaced, which is a really good little test. So you can, if you think you have a noun clause, you can try to replace that clause with this, that, or someone, something. If that makes sense in the sentence, then you're probably right, you got a noun clause. Noun clauses will end at punctuation marks. They'll also be the main verb. They'll be around the main verb of the sentence or direct object. All right, so tips. Cannot be removed. Check by replacing with this, that, someone, or something. And also really look at diagramming it out. It really does help. That's it. That is your lesson for noun clauses. We'll finish today with sentence structure next. and hope you guys have a great first day back. Bye.